Working as a police officer really blows. Sorry for it to start rude, but you'll soon find out why. My name is Officer Rand. My first name is not important. Stop asking your cheeky little chocolate digestive biscuit, you. I have been forced since 1979, having to join when I was only 19. Despite my best efforts, I have never been promoted, which annoys me to no tomorrow. Why does the low-level Mr. Nosy has connections with the same bistro O corporation always gets pronounced at whist when I'm left in the dark? Well, the main reason for me is getting promoted because my superiors all hate me, especially my idol, Sergeant Joe Gallstone. Gallstone was originally just a low-level beat cop that was just like me. When Archie Culminator took over the commissioner and Gallstone knows in the province and received the promotion as sergeant, I became his pro league, which I always wanted to marry that gasoline, even though I was married with a kid. Now with have you seen my son? Well, he went to Fordham with his McMuskie sons. Anyways, Galistino is a corrupted piece of mungus who likes taking bribes from pretty much every gang in the city. I've even threatened to expose him multiple times, which led him to Gaston giving me a big slap across my meaty chops. Now moving on from the Gaston, let's talk about my son. His name is Fred and he's proper smelly. He got kicked out of the Fordham University after farting into a teacher's face. Rude not to carrot onion. After my wife died from watching Shrek the Third on Blu-ray, I became a single parent. I love my son because he's one fat son of a gun. And he sits on his ass all day, smoking pot, and even playing Shrek 2 on the Xbox. It sickens me. Despite my son not having his job, despite him having a job, he works as a Chinese quarter, but he keeps it to himself. He's a pro league under Mr. Cho in his home for Mr. Wong. He has also been stealing drape with a man with a Hawaiian shirt. Something which would anger Leo Gansely, I'm sure. My son suffers from irritable bowel syndrome, which he has to take a crap around maybe over 9,000 times a day. My son hates my guts, even worse so as the CLPD in Gastineau. He hates me because I didn't get him and the B movie on DVD, Blu-ray. B movie was his favorite film because he was in love with Barry Benson B's family's smelly rat-faced friend named Adam. But that sure does not make any sense, does it? Well, meanwhile, Gastineau hates me because I smell like an ass, but I steam like a clam. Get it? Oh, shut up, dear reader. I know you do, cheeky little chocolate digestive biscuit. But now I just didn't go on the massive rant like I made you feel sorry for me. No, I did that so you can have a little background on the story. I'm going to rely on you today. It all started on a freezing cold outside of January back when Mr. Coconuts went back to work in M142. I was on my parking duty for the day, and it was some kind of Judy Hopps when Gastineau approached me. He grabbed me by the neck and then forced my body to turn to face him. His breath then stunk like cigarettes and smelly words. Hey, you little Gastineau, you must pay my tribute to me, Gastineau yelled at the top of his mighty lungs of mightiness. Let me explain. Gastineau was a master antagonist who supposedly providing his kickback ex-mozzarella in one of the most powerful gangsters of all great time of Britain. He also used his connection to scare people into giving him money to be some corner like Don Facci and his smelly dog. But of course, this isn't the place to be for Salty the dog and me. I'm getting off topic. I apologize for that. Anyways, Gaston began beating me up until I slipped into a large donut into his pocket. Don't make me get you back at you, boyo, Gaston then barked before continuing with, I got some work for my Parisian little listen to you closely, Gaston was said as he fell on the floor and began holding my stomach. He thinks that I broke my intestines. I then began to crap them out onto the floor, but that's another story. Gaston then lit himself a cigarette before saying, There's a bakery over there a couple clips up the road. A family being owned by a bakery, and our son just received a DVD of some kind. Gaston then took off a big puff and jig and breathing the smoke into my face. I just wanted to punch him right there in his gob, but no offense. He then looked at my social laundry mat dealer, and Gaston already being continued with speaking. They are saying that the material on the DVD was so offensive, and they're not going to take it up to the counselor's campaign. And we cannot have that can we, Ran? I shook my face and Gaston finished it with it. So go to the bakery and ask them about the DVD. If you tell anyone about this, I'll have you killed by my grandmother, Darth Vader. With that said, Gaston then disappeared in a flash of smoke, only joking as he awkwardly strolled away from on the scooter and his grandpa had been giving him for his birthday. His grandpa was an old dog, and literally he was a bulldog. Yep, not even joking with that one, dear reader. I made my way up to the road towards the bakery, and proceeded to let myself in. I didn't even knock on the door before entering the place, because I'm quite rude. The owner was a family of polar bears. Yep, they were polar bears all right. They had come to London during the Prohibition, and gained a lot of money from bootlegging fish from the North Pole and Canada. And they were obviously receiving protection from solo zoos, and the Willy Turk had been planned as well. The family were so kind to me, and the mother and Miss Duper was offering me to make a cup of tea, and I said yes. Well, I proceeded to ask the father and Mr. Duper about the DVD. Well, it was a Christmas present for my son, you see. I got it for him because he was a little crap. Mr. Duper explained under his breath while stinking his fishy round tables. Oh yeah, I went there, and that very moment my son walked in. His name was Sylvester Stallone, and he was even fatter than the father and the mother. Oh, hello, fishy boy, Sylvester proclaimed as he actually sounded like the actor Sylvester Stallone. Ironic, I know he really did. Mr. Duper ordered Sylvester to bring him the DVD. He did as he was told, and while he was getting the DVD, Miss Duper came back in with the room, placing a cup of boiling tea into the table right in front of me. I didn't even thank her because my supervisor, Major Todd, told me about their real arcs. And of course, they proceeded me to not say thank you anything either. Sylvester came back holding a DVD and handed it to me. It was a big and small DVD. The cover had a picture of Big crying with Small. Laughing at him, there was no little title as it was covered in a thick layer of Nolan North Man's made ketchup. It was so thick I tried using a spatula to pry the thing off, but it wouldn't budge. I flipped the DVD over and saw it had a picture of Flanders eating Homer's ear. I then proceeded to ask if we could watch it, and Mr. Duper agreed as long as we keep it down, as Mr. Finch would be watching Harry Hill's a TV burp on the other counter of the room. Mrs. Duper then went to the back of the room, and he returned a few minutes later. Later on, holding a portable DVD player, and then placed it right in front of me. We set the thing up while I took a sip of my tea, and it tasted like ass. The DVD then began with the commercials, but something was wrong. One commercial had a cartoon cat on the date with a man named Pew. And then all of a sudden, the smelly dog came on screen with a piece of chalk in its paw and said, "Don't be grueling the gruel," he yelled angrily. Another commercial, which had a fat walrus beating the crap out of the local carpenter, and another one had Rap Rat dancing to the rhyme of the night. And Rap Rat also looked at the screen and yelled, "Wait your turn!" It was so loud that it caused me to crap out more of my intestines, but that's another story. The main menu then appeared, and it was a picture of Big and Small hiding in a closet like they do in every episode Stormy Weather, but the only option was play episode sexy. I then clicked on the episode and began with the theme song. Something was really wrong right there. Well, for starters, Big and Small weren't singing the lyrics. Instead, they were sang by Carl Plinkton. And, of course, it was also ironic that Big was very small, and while Small was really huge. Also, the puppets looked really bad, like they were covered in mud, or at least I hope it was mud. It looked like the puppets had been found behind a dumpster, or something like that. The episode then started with Big and Small playing cards in the kitchen. The song I Forget You by CeeLo Green was playing in the background. It was so loud that I couldn't hear any of the characters actually speaking. Even the blind men dogs had claimed they have heard it while they run away from Scrooge and the Grubby Fingers. The music then eventually stopped and Big said, "You know something, Small? I think T-Rex would love to play cards with us. I'll go and get him." Big then left the kitchen and go to his favorite bush, while Small muttered, "Oh crap." Suddenly, a loud no that could be heard from Big coming from the kitchen crying as well. I think he was crying. It sounded like the car alarm was going off. "What's wrong, Big? What's the problem?" I asked as he came in through the cat flap. Of course, Big and Small didn't even seem to notice that Big was sobbing heavily for at least a good 10 hours. Believe me, I checked my watch. "What's wrong with Big?" Small asked, as he was now voiced by Christopher Welkin, who was busy walking his dog. Ha, get it? The small T-Rex has missed it again. Big then grabbed Small with his mighty paws, then held him up into the air. You better not have anything to do with this, Small. You were the reason T-Rex went missing last time. If I found out it was you, I'll kill you. Big yelled angrily as she threw Small onto the floor, breaking his back within the process. Small managed to recover since he had taken some hospital lessons from Mr. Sir Roger Coblan, the world's famous heart surgeon. Big then opened the back door and planned to ask Tweeba about his missing sour. But of course, for all these years, the Big and Small fandom, Tweeba was a worm with the curly hair who lives in an apple in Big and Small's garden. She was also a tramp who basically ratted out to Small last time when T-Rex went missing. Tweeba was most likely getting paid off by the Atlantic Corporation and with her undercover lover Avery Carrington. Carrington had a real faint in his state, but it was not fake, as it did. That was sick. I can't even tell Tweeba was a snitch, which on me again, Big Small muttered under his breath. He then leapt out of the kitchen window and somehow reached Tweeba's apple before Big did, as he was busy taking a crap in his shed. Small received Tweeba, who also turned around and asked, "What does a ghost eat for breakfast?" Ghost ass. Small then proceeded to chop Tweeba in half with the meat cleaver. He had learned his tactic from the Empire Bay treads, who were once butchered Harry Tommaso to death in the park for being a pesky indolent. Small then heard the shed's toilet flush and proceeds to flee in the scene before Big left his shed. Big went up to the tree and then crapped himself all over the garden, and when he did see what happened to Tweeba, "Small! Small!" Big cried out. A Small appeared from behind him holding a book. "What's the matter? Holy duck!" The Big began sobbing as he did Small. It sounded like the cat was getting ran over by a car driven by a duck who was late for work, where his boss, Big Boy Frank, could give him the big promotion with the executive. The screen then cuts to Big and Small drinking the cups of tea in the kitchen. "This day has been total disaster," Big said before continuing with, "Tweeba's dead, T-Rex is missing, and if Avery thinks we killed her, it will be warned. We're screwed." Small didn't say anything, but he was visibly nervous. Suddenly the music began to play in the background. The song of the episode began to play. The song of this was the song "I Miss My Sore," which had been used in the episode in the case of the missing sore. However, the lyrics had been changed so that Big was now saying "I miss my song" instead of "I miss you, my sore." While Big was singing, Small attempted to eat the dinner while Wissett, the waitress, practicing politics in The Businessman, who slowly got stoned. Well, that's even better alone, at least, I suppose. After the song ended, Big and Small was shown getting themselves ready for bed. Big couldn't sleep, but Small managed to fall asleep easily. Small then proceeded to have a nightmare about the courtroom with Big serving as judge. "Mr. Small," Big said before continuing with, "It is true that you stole my story and let it get and killed Tweeba before she could tell me?" "Well, technically, nah," Small's lawyer Robbie Rotten said. "I say he's guilty." "I say he's guilty," Patrick Starr, who is in the jury with some strange reason. "That's not true, goddammit!" Small cried as Big handed down the final verdict. "Mr. Small, your crimes against people of this good city, the court hereby say to sentence you to death in the electric chair," then proceeded to slam his hammer, signaling that the case was closed. Small was then shown being put on the chair, an incredibly smelly man eating an apple, serving as the executioner. He pulled the lever, but then Small found himself falling from some more. He was falling towards the fiery pits of hell. Satan then appeared with a bulldog, and he said, "Throw him into the pot, boyo." Small fell into the pot with Rusty Walrus appeared yelling, "Ah, you owed me fresh meat, you in this pot." Small attempted to run away, but Rusty chased after him. Small was then just too slow, and Rusty picked him up with his mighty claws. "You fool!" Rusty laughed evilly as he began eating Small. Of course, Small woke up from his nightmare, screaming some more, which caused Big to enter the room, confused as hell. "Small, what's the matter?" Big asked, as Small said, "Oh, sorry, Big. I just had a bad dream, that's all." "Well, it sounded pretty intense. Do you want to talk about it?" Big asked, but Small shook his head violently. After the scene then changed to show Big and Small in the garden, then arranged the funeral for Tweeba and everyone in the attendance, including Colonel Dodo and the Rusto brothers and Avery Carrington, and Jack Espesai and the Corporal who got paid for the respects of the fallen hero. Small and Big served as pallbearers, and of course Big was delivering a huge alloy about Tweeba. Everyone cried. Don Sari cried into Mother's shoulder. You wouldn't want to think of each other's throats after the day before. A time-tile card came on which read 2 days later, which was read by the French nator from SpongeBob for some bizarre reason. Small was then shown in the kitchen, looking through the photo album with smoking a cigarette. He had begun to narrate the things that weren't bad. They are going to get worse. The truth is going to come out sooner or later. Then I am going to have Big after me along with Carrington and Atlantic Corporation. This wasn't how I imagined it. Then when I stole T-Rex and dreamed about living in peace, I guess that got more or less, but along with came with the guilt and the blood of my friends. It was finally catching up with me. It was all just a matter of time. The screen then cut to Big on his phone contact with the police department. It had been correct. Carrington did blame him and Small for Tweeba's death and wanted a reproduction. But at that same day, Small was picked up by Carrington and was playing hide and seek in the garden with Mr. Uppity in the car. Carrington then yelled at Small for a good half of an hour before saying, "Don't forget about my friends, Small. I got you at least one last chance to make it right." "Okay, I'm listening," Small said as Carrington finished with, "You are going to get rid of Ruby, and do us all a favor." "And if I refuse?" Small asked before Carrington explained. "You will die. Frank and the rest of the corporation want you dead. So does Mr. Chu. And on top of you being killed by Tweeba, you are going to think Big is going to let you on his side. You're a madman walking." Small then exited out of the car and grabbed a Tommy gun from his shed, and then headed towards the shed before reaching the Ruby's mouse hole. By the way, dear reader, Ruby is an annoying mouse who lives in Small and Big's free of charge. So Ruby was just laughed when she saw Small enter her doorway without invitation. "What did Carrington tell you, Small? Kill me and it's all forgiven? You think you could just let me in after everything you did? At least your buddy knows how to do business, don't ya, Big?" Ruby then finished with Big put a gun to Small's head. "I don't care about Carrington and those old people at the corporation. They're using you, Small, just like they did when Morrell used you, and just like I used you, and just like that Tweeba tramp used you. You killed, you piece of crap, and then you were innocent, and now you're going to pay for it now, Big," Ruby said as she, instead of Big being picked Ruby up and ate her big hole. "Well, of course, let's get out of here," Big said as he turned to Small and leave the kitchen. "So what is she talking about back there?" Small asked as I proceeded to explain that Small had been the one to steal T-Rex and kill Tweeba. The truth been told, Big was actually happy when Tweeba died and was secretly waiting for something or someone to get rid of her. Thanks to Small, that was no longer necessary. But Small asked about T-Rex, and Big said that he can always get another toy store. They got outside in the garden only to find Carrington find a large group of mobsters waiting for them. Big and Small tried to get in with their cars, and Small tried to get into the car which had Carrington in it. But during the ride, Small asked Carrington, "Did you get me an Xbox for killing Ruby?" Carrington didn't answer through the windshield of the car. Small could see the car, our bike being carried outside Big that carried the opposite direction. "Whoa, what's going on? Where are they taking Big?" Carrington sighed before saying, "Sorry, kid, Big wasn't part of the deal." Of course, the deal Small had made with Carrington the other day only covered him while Big was asleep, waiting to be killed by 2 assassins for Carrington's payroll. They had managed to escape the ordeal, but the assassins went on the run to Chicago, thinking that the Poker King Midwest Gus Pulaski could help him out. Instead of, Pulaski then turned around him and, of course, had Big beaten to death by his poker band before Big refused to be bowed to the music to Gus's trumpet. How dirty does it sound? Well, Small, meanwhile, then exited out for the New Orleans where he got a job working as an accountant for the Marcio family. He still thinks about what he did, knowing that his actions at Tweeba got him a big kill. It was Mauricio who basically plans to sentence him. All Small could do now was pray, and he prayed for the souls of Tweeba and Big. The DVD player then turned himself off, only joking Duper to switch it off. Of course, Sylvester was then crying with us of Geppetto's delivery hands that were started making Pinocchio's legs and head. Suddenly I heard the toilet flush and Fred came in holding his stomach. He attempted to flee but managed to catch him, then proceeded to explain that this was given to him by a man named Skyrunner SG-1. It turns out that Fred had never actually worked as a Chinese quarter. He was actually working for a gang known as the Lost Episode Residents. The residents had given him a DVD in order to see if Gastineau was working for Rab Manuals, whatever that means. I thanked Duper for the family for help and left the bakery with Fred accompanying me. We went to the police station in order to confront Gastineau about it. Gastineau wasn't there and he was busy, having it his way but for the hot mattress. Of course, with that, he wanted to work Rikers Field for Caroline family. I was tired and the bishop and came to accompany me by P.A. Father Jessup, who is smelly priest in the world. The smell was so intense that it nearly knocked me out of his brain and asked, "We would like to file a missing person case. Our dear Sylvester Mandel had gone missing. And of course, a lot of people have been, including ourselves, have been really missing him." "Hi, Father Jessup, helping a bishop in Bernard, are you?" I asked, which Jessup replied with, "No, I'm at Shrek's swamp having one of those rat stew. The smell of Jessup was so intense that I nearly passed out. The smell of the skunk of rotten cheese, rotten meat, rotten egg, eggy bread, poo, rotten socks, and anything rotten you can imagine. I tried so hard being friendly with Jessup, but I had, as he had gone to school with Fred, I was trying to find him, Lynn. But, of course, the Commander Hardbrook was then Brennan who yelled, "Don't call me Lynn when you little bullocks. I'm a bishop. So who is the Sylvester Manty?" Of course, Fred asked as Jessup replied with, "He's a cat with 9 lives." This caused Brennan to laugh heavily for hours, even though Joseph's joke was terrible. Bishop Brennan then turned to leave before saying, "Come on, Jessup, we're leaving. I have to be in Rome tomorrow for an audience that Pope with this gang with smelly junkyard dogs. I don't even speak to his grace like that ever again." Of course, Jessup warned as he began to follow Brennan outside the Royal like a dog, whose owner was many parking fines. We have decided to go home as well and decided to go pay my mother a visit. After all, she only lost a couple of blocks down the road she lived, and down the road was the police station. We reached my mother's house as soon as she opened the door and began beating me with her nose hairs. "Do you know what you need? A nice cup of tea. You got the time?" my mother asked as Fred replied with, "Oh, go, no way." And then suddenly the blue van then appeared from behind us with 2 men wearing masks and pulling us into the vehicle. My mother came out of the vehicle holding a kettle, screaming, "Look what you did to my supper! Now I shall have to make some more." And then she did that all because my mother was addicted to Chewits, or some kind of Winston Chew. The van then began speeding down the roads, and with the drivers finally revealing themselves to be frankly hot Matthew Williams. "You don't want to get personal family involved in this, Ron," Matthew explained, as he asked, "Who the hell are you guys?" "I never got my tea, and there will be time for tea later. Right now we gotta get you to see Skyrunner. He'll want to meet you." He then followed in a large birdhouse Bristol, and he found a heavily guarded several people carrying guns. Lazuras and Lamed began behind on the scene towards us. "What's with the new faces?" William asked as Manamite replied with, "Ever since we whacked Salver Mando, Skyrunner has been tripled our security." Mantamite has been proclaimed to proceed to escort us, even though through the house living room window. Skyrunner was busy talking to someone over the phone. "Yeah, I understand. Don't worry, your brother will be fine." He then hung up and then turned to face the Manamite. "That was Shadow's sister. She's worried. She doesn't know if Ray Manuels and his men are going to go after her or not." Skyrunner then turned his face before saying, "Good evening, Officer Ron. Did you get here okay?" "What the hell's going on here?" I asked Skyrunner as he began to tell me a story. He explained that Gastineau was on a ride with Manuel's payroll and served as many syndicates on crop of the payroll. He then worked for Manuel's in the sonogram and holding up the stones that had been Manuel's protection money. So it was Rabe Gastineau who was providing the kickbacks with non-Manstra. But of course Skyrunner and his friends had been supplied the DVD by their former Joey, who worked at the Manuals. Syndicate their lost media counter. Then Skyrunner proceeded to give the DVD a new recruit to Fred, then turned in giving the DVD over to me and the Duper family. Ray then heard about Duper family's complaints through the article Commenter, and they had ordered Gastineau to silence him. Gastineau then gave me at least the task of interviewing Dupers because I had no connection with Skyrunner and his crew. I figured that I was stupid to connect the DVD to Rab Manuals and Coyamender. I then sat down on the sofa and lit myself a cigarette. At this point, Richard Fatchett entered the house, revealing to be the owner of him, and accompanied him by his new pad Fritz. But of course, how's Shadow doing? Shadow Linus asked, confused. He'll be okay, Fatchett explained before continuing with, he still can't talk, and his sister blames us for getting him shot. The good news is that he's heavily guarded by BC Network and Tyler Jameson. There's also some pesky journalists of all times there to go ahead and ask him questions. Fatchett then turned to face me and then wrinkled his mighty wink like Raymond did, and which caused the Game Boy Color to explode all these years ago. Within this lonely Goomba, stuck between two pipes, I guess he'll pay that Game Boy for the rest of his life. I sensed that romance blooming underneath the covers of the nasty chicken swamp rat. I sat on the sofa smoking my cigarette and began to wonder, what did this Gastineau did to the Duper family? That's all I could really do as Skyrunner and I began lecturing about who his crew was. I turned around to face Fatchett, who now sat down on the sofa next to me, and asked me as his friend Fritz. Fatchett proceeded to explain that Fritz was his new personal assistant upon the death of his old pal Needley, who had been turned out to be a format for manuals. So who killed him? I asked. Fatchett replied with me. Fatchett began to laugh evenly while Skyrunner practiced telling them that Shadow Linus was on the nearby sofa. I was in for a really long night. Sup boys, it's Richard Fatchett back at again with another romantic, horrific tale. I was getting ready to be picked up by P.A. Needle at my house with Bristol. Skyrunner had made it very clear to me that last night that Needley has to be killed, and it had to be today. I had already replaced Needley with my brother Fritz, who had been a real thing for a waste of management and buses for a bizarre reason. I hadn't slept very good all night, and fish and chips were delivered the last proper tested rancid or something else like that. My cousin Runkino used to cook for me before he became partner with an olive oil company set up by his former rival, General Abeto. And if you're wondering why we plan to kill Needley, dear reader, well, I know you are sexy. The Manual boys Joey had revealed to be that Needley had been working for a spy for Manuals for less than a month. This arranged me, as Needley has been one of the bosses, Story's benefactor, and he stole Tomato. But of course he had turned black on me. Needley's betrayal didn't have come across worse especially than the recent death of Luca Barsi, who would have foretold Needley would have been turned into a traitor. From the inside of my house, I could see Needley's car that pulled up in the driveway with Fritz sitting on the back seat. I left the house and locked the door behind me, and I got into the car and made my way collapse on one side, thanks to my fat butt. I then also had a really cool car. It's red. It's a really classic model too. Needley explained that he was busy having yet another phone to Rarity. I snatched it from him and proceeded to have another nuke drop on Rarity's boutique, and courtesy of connections with Mr. Nutella. Have you ever heard of him? He's quite nutty, get it? I proceeded to let out a massive fart, which made Fritz pass out. I began speaking with, that Skyrunner's running wild. He wants you to go to the mattresses immediately. Do you know any good spots to our Match Street? Of course, Needley then grinned and already knew how much information he would be worth to Manuel's people. Wreck-It Ralph! Needley proclaimed before he hit the elevator and proceeded to speed down the busy highway going west towards the city. During the ride, I began Fritz's hair, which had tasted like Farmer Francis' homegrown sausages, before we reached our destination. Hey, a chance of plans, Needley. Take me home, baby. I gotta take a crap, I said. Needley did as he was told, and proceeded to have the car out in reverse. Needley then began speeding getting back to Bristol, but somehow ended up getting lost in a small countryside after buying some chewits from an incredibly old smelly mustache Pete, who had proclaimed to be his favorite side of the track of the countryside. Don't you get it? Because I don't. Not gonna lie, I also requested for Needley not to pull over so I could do my business in the bushes next, as I couldn't hold out any longer. Having worked on for me for so long, Needley knew I had some serious bowel issues thanks to my corrupted doctor, Sir Roger Coleman, and his famous heart surgeon who gave me the wrong pills. I went over to the bushes and heard Needley say, "Wreck-It Ralph!" And this was the first time I ever heard those words as a loud gunshot engulfed the air. Needley was no more. Fritz then emerged from the car and discarded the car. Then we got into another car being driven by Dorma Maldovar, who had been taken to Luska Barcy's place in our residence. He proceeded to drive us back to my house in Bristol. Arrived at the house in Bristol, I found his armed thief and questioned Laris for this. Laris then shrugged for 2 hours before saying, "The residents have finally got up on the school bar. Sylvester Mente is 4 o'clock this is the morning." I went over to walk past him, but then by Mente who told, "By the way, we got the full confrontation on Luca. They had killed him the night before they shot Shadow, and I'm Johnny Bargerton's DVD store. Imagine that." I shrugged before saying, "Must have caught him off guard." We were out there by the cat flap with Daddy Pig, who was then trying to catch the local butcher who has to play basketball. "But you can't throw the ball," Daddy cried as men then proceeded to escort me and Fritz out of the living room. Treated me like an outsider, even though it was my house we were operating in. The rude carrot onion. I wanted to eat him so badly with all the chips and loaf of bread, and possibly the loaf of bread in the living room. We see Skyrunner finishing off a live stream. Shadow Linus sat on the couch beside him, while BC Network ate the breadsticks far from the other room. "Hey, where's Tyler?" I asked, as Skyrunner replied with, "He's under sedation. I guess I see in the Shadow Arena really gunned him down hard. Doc says that he'll be out for at least a week, for 3 more days." I sat down on the sofa next to Linus, and we sat down and forced so much to get it up and go up to see the sky for the brief moment before eventually turning back down. "How's Shadow doing?" Linus asked, and Skyrunner replied with, "He still can't talk, and his family are out visiting him in the hospital today. By the way, Richard, how's Neely?" I didn't answer, but I proceeded to eat all of Skyrunner and BC Network's dinner, and BC cried heavily. Skyrunner got the message from Needley that he was dead. "I don't know exactly how we researched that conclusion, but whatever then," Skyrunner then said. Then proceeded, "Then Ray Manuels will soon get the word on information on his death, and how will that affect him? He will then realize how lucky the other day." I answered as Skyrunner proceeded to slap me with a slice of pizza. "No, that wasn't luck. Ray and Johnny told me that for weeks, months maybe. They must sail the Shadow all the way back to his house at least 69 times. When we got used to the habits, they brought Needley off, and somehow managed to catch Luca off guard, and they had everything settled. And the gunmen raped and were hired were not good enough. And Shadow moved too quickly, and he had died. I would have made a deal with Rabe if he would have won." "Sorry about that, Gaston," Manette began with a cup of tea in the kitchen. "He's working for Manuels or not." Skyrunner didn't answer. "We're not quite sure yet, but we just have the DVD over to Fred, and he's looking at some unlucky family to buy it from him," BC explained, before Wissa getting up from his chair. "Well, I'm off to the hospital guard now, Shadow. No, Skyrunner will tell Jameson when he's recovered as well. He's more than welcome to join me down there. I could use the company." "Will do," Skyrunner said, and with that BC Network disappeared out of the shadow and of the house, catching the cab in the hospital. I walked over towards the living room window and looked outside, and we watched as BC and the cab had disappeared into the distance, as well rain began to pour violently onto the streets outside. And that, my little pretties, was Small's Big Mistake. A big and small lost episode funny pasta written none other than Matthew Bumford. Now, thank you so much for writing this story, Matthew Bumford, and thank you so much for sending me this story. I've been looking forward to reading this story for quite a long time now, and finally I have the opportunity. So, my final thoughts on the story? Well, I could definitely say I actually found this funny pasta to be rather funny and really good in my opinion. Like, when I saw this, I actually was laughing because of how silly it was. So I had to take multiple, reads before I sat there and went out of my way and did a narration of this, because I was just laughing because of how silly it was. Like, I could definitely picture, Small doing all this, but I could imagine an episode of that happening, but at the same time, they wouldn't, include, anyone getting killed or anything, because I know my channel's, made for mature audiences, so this is actually a pretty fun story for what it was. It was a pretty fun story for me to sit there and read. Like, I was pretty surprised to find this. Now, funny enough, I did try to look for a big and small creepypasta. I found one at one point, and I think it was cliched or something, and, No, I'm not talking about this one, but I'm talking about the other one. The other one I did find, it's been deleted, but I'm surprised that it was cliched. So that's actually one of the reasons why I actually found this story to be, well, cliched, so to speak. Well, not this story, but the other story I did. But this story, on the other hand, was a lot better. Like, the grammar of this story was very good and well done, along with the sentence structuring, the paragraph structuring, the storyline, and this one was obviously really well made and funny in detail. Now, I know this is not going to be a long review because, well, it's a long story, so I'm going to keep the review as short as I possibly can. Now, for what this story was, it was actually a really funny story. Like, I could picture, big and small, episode like this, but it would be more of a kid-friendly matter. But I could honestly see them doing something like this. And this is not completely out of the ordinary for big and small to do. Like, this story was obviously pretty good. So, with that being the case, I actually found this story to be rather enjoyable in detail. Like, I actually found this story to be rather amazing. Like, I really do like how the concept of this was actually pretty nice and well done. It actually played out really well. So, with that being the case, yeah, this story itself was actually really good. I really like a lot of Matthew Bumford stories, and I've been wanting to read this story for like a while, and finally I had the chance to sit there and read it. It's a really good story, really good, really well made, and I actually really liked how this story went out. It was really amazing with this story. So, with that being the case, what did I actually think of this story? Now, the story itself was actually really nice. It's a really good, well, made, and it's pretty good as well. So I could definitely say I love how this story went out. It was flat out amazing. It was really well done. I love how, the concept was good and all that, and I actually liked, how this episode went out for what it was. It's a pretty good episode. It was pretty good for what it was. It was really interesting. So, with that being the case, yeah. I actually found this one to be really good, Matthew Bumford. You did pretty good at this story. So, with that being the case, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm going to sit here and just kind of wrap up the review because, this is not really a long review due to the story being long. And like I said, trying to keep the review as short as I possibly can. Now, like I'm going to say right now, and like I always continue to say, this is simply my own personal opinion. And if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these funny pastas. And this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be a 10 out of 10. Great story, really well made, love the detail, I love how everything went out, it's just really well made, it's awesome, I love the story, it's really awesome, and there's definitely lots of time and effort into the story. So with that being the case, what did you guys think about this story? Did you all enjoy it? Did you not? Also, what you have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Leave me know your thoughts down in the comments section down below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you happen to be brand new here on this channel, be sure to like, comment, subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out here. And I'll be catching you all in the next video. So peace out, everyone. And as always, I'll be catching you all in the next upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.